This is the perfect storm for me. I've been fighting Kanye West fans for years now, strictly based on his music. And then I was fighting based on his sneakers. There's a handful of Yeezys that I do like, but for the most part, those are, I've always said that Kanye West is the emperor's new clothes. Mm-hmm. And at one point I was talking literally about his clothes because they were $800 hoodies with holes in them and just like kind of gross, weird sneakers that the hype had surrounded and the streets and the public had deemed to be it. And that's cool. I do like that, where it's just like there's something very intriguing about that. There's something infuriating about it if you were making your own sneakers or you're in the fashion industry and you're making a quality product and this guy comes along with like weird, shitty stuff that is selling, at higher prices than you ever could imagine. It's like, what the fuck? But for me, someone on the internet, someone who's like, I'm trying to market myself. I'm trying to market my own clothes, my own product, my own content. There's nothing more valuable in the world than getting that and achieving that level of like, and it truly became Emperor's New Clothes when it was like, he's putting out Crocs. He's putting out, like, it seemed like sometimes Kanye was like testing people, being like, what can I get away with here? How fucking lame and weird can I make my shit and still see people reselling them for $2,000?
And I think sometimes people want that too. Like if all of a sudden he just like came up with some fresh button-ups and it was just like, it looked kind of normal, they'd be like, well, fuck, like I liked being part of the out crowd.
Feidelberg is a great microcosm for what's gone on with Kanye because he loved him. He loved his music. He loved his fashion. But he also like fights love that it was exclusive and that it was rare and that if you had a pair of Yeezys, you were the only one. And then if you had a shirt, there was a status involved in it. And then, to Kanye's credit, he partners up with the Gap and he says that his goal in life is that everyone should be able to afford a pair of Yeezys. And it's kind of like, oh, all right, that's actually like a noble cause. But guys like Feidelberg then turned and said like, well, I don't want it anymore.
Right.
So, and Kanye can say all he wants about like how he's more than that. He's not just hype and what's cool and what's like hot in the streets, but he likes that. Mm-hmm. He mentions 10 times in the Rogan interview how he has $5 billion, and he mentions how cool he is and how great he is. So there is ego driven, and you know what doesn't get you ego? When you're the dude who sells $30 shoes in the Gap. It's noble, it's cool. It's actually very righteous and like awesome that kids everywhere of all shapes, sizes, colors, backgrounds, and economic backgrounds can afford your shoes, but it ain't cool. When Starberry was selling shoes for $15, when Shaq put his shoes in Walmart, nobody wanted those. People want Air Jordans. People want Yeezys.
But so do you think that he's like pivoting? Do you think he doesn't want the acclaim of being a fashion designer anymore?
I think he's stuck. That's why I don't get what's going on here. And now the Emperor's New Clothes thing has gone from the actual clothes to his content, if you will, his campaign, if you will, because when I'm listening to that interview, if you haven't listened, don't. I mean, Joe Rogan and Kanye go for 3 hours, and I'm not kidding you. He doesn't say one thing. The only one tangible thing that came out of that was when he said, when I talk about topics I know about, I speak with confidence. And when I talk about topics I don't know about, I overcompensate and I speak with arrogance. And then my fear has been replaced by my faith. So now I'm confident with everything. I think there's a cool life lesson in that for everyone, where it's like, you might not always know what you're talking about, but you can look like you know and act like you know what you're talking about. And that's fake it till you make it. That's snake it till you make it, which we've been talking about for a decade here. He just does it on a level that's higher than ever. So on one level, in one regard, I actually respect Kanye because it's the ultimate snake it till you make it. He's a rapper and a sneaker guy who has convinced enough people, not nearly enough, but a lot of people, that he could be president. I mean, that's insane.
So in this interview, what were you expecting going into it? Did you expect Joe to ask him about his campaign, or did you expect him to ask him about fashion or music? Or because this is the problem. I don't think anybody knew. I don't really think Joe knew. That is the problem, because a lot of times people will come on to either shoot the shit with him and be like, we're going to talk about everything. And a lot of times it ends up going like political because that's just like the biggest discussion in the world going on right now. So comedians talk about it, scientists talk about it, whoever he has on. But I think Joe was just intrigued by Kanye in general. And I don't know if he was like, let's get at this. I think he wanted to know about him going to the hospital and the medications, which Kanye either doesn't fully know about or just didn't remember.
Or doesn't want to talk about it. I mean,
or doesn't want to talk about it. Or he wanted to dig into his mind a little bit.
You tell the world that you were prescribed like some straight up antipsychotic psychosis medicine. That's probably not great, So when he's like, oh, I don't know, maybe he's embarrassed by that. Maybe it was a heavy medication. Right. But Joe, that was the one thing that Joe Rogan really did speak up on, where he was like, I know that I'm a little bit weird, and if someone tried to prescribe something that would stop that, I wouldn't agree to that. That was,
right.
Again, the only time I really didn't finish the last like 45 minutes, so maybe there was a lot more, but he didn't really speak up. Joe Rogan is not known for like his pressing questions in his interview, but he always has his own opinions, and he always speaks up on like, well, no, I think this, and he didn't speak up at all. Maybe because he doesn't have his own, he's not running for president, so he doesn't have his own platform, or he doesn't necessarily have the same religious background, so he can't speak to some of the Bible stuff. But Joe didn't speak at all.
The problem I saw with this interview was a lot like the debate moderators, because Kanye will not stop talking if you don't stop him. Like, so you ask him one question, and this is the one way I sort of feel bad for him, because he does have some type of condition, and maybe it's not complete, it's like a complete manic situation, or maybe when he is medicated, he has it under control, but he has a lot of thoughts going on in his head. So you ask him, what, if you're running for president, what do you want to do about student debt? And he goes back to like the Black Panthers, because that's where his brain goes. And it's like, hey dude, if that's who you are and I'm your friend, I'm not mad at that, but we are trying to conduct an interview here. So like, can you talk with somebody ahead of time and be like, what are you going to say? What's your point? How are you going to get to it?
Forget about if you're my friend. If you are a singer and a fashion designer, we can do that interview too, because when you sit down with a creative kind of weirdo, you do watch their mind wander and meander through the conversation, and you can kind of understand where it's like, oh wow, he probably does the same thing with colors and fabrics and instruments and sound, and that's how he puts together the shit. But what we were talking about is a guy who wants to run for president.
Right.
You can't be all over the map when we're trying to talk about like, an actual issue. That's why when some people, the people who were impressed by that interview, I cannot imagine who you are. You're either, I've been characterizing Kanye as the freshman in college who takes a philosophy course and thinks that, that blew his mind because his parents and his teachers never told him about some of the ideas and some of the more idealistic and alternative ways of thinking. So maybe that's you. And so you agree with Kanye because that's the first time you've heard it.
Yeah.
Or maybe you are idealistic yourself and you think that's where the world should get. And that's where we should end up, where where everything's sustainable and everything's free and nothing is dangerous. Like all that crazy shit that's like, yeah. When people are like, oh, he had some great ideas, it's like, yeah, like Bernie Sanders had a great idea that everyone goes to college for free. Right. That's a great idea.
Well, but
how do you make it happen?
Right.
And that's where there was never a follow-up and there was never an answer that's like, here is a real topic and a real issue, and here's your real answer. Everything was, God came to me, or my mom wanted this, or I want that, or Nikola Tesla tried to. And it's like, yeah. I know. Kanye was never wrong. He wasn't saying anything factually incorrect. He wasn't talking fake news. He was just speaking so grandiose and so out of left field where it's like, well, what would you do on day one, dude? Because we can't be making, greenhouses, spaceships.
But you were expecting to have answers about his campaign then, because if he just brought on John Mayer and they were talking about doing edibles and he was like, listen, I read in colors, you'd be like, oh, John Mayer's a wild dude. But in this, it was like a little more, I was like, if you were really impressed by that, it's easy to be profound. And if you hear your favorite artist say something that's thought-provoking, you probably like it. like, you know, you just like when people sound smart. But I mean, like, you can literally just like Google things. Like I read a book recently where this guy was talking about waterfalls and how they're perceived as a thing, but they're actually just perpetual motion. So nothing you're looking at is ever the same. It's constant motion.
Right.
And
Sure.
that's how human beings are. Human beings
Cool.
are always changing, and the only thing that holds us together is memory. Okay.
Cool.
That was fucking awesome, right? Like,
Love that. Like when I sit down with Duncan Trussell
What is
and we
it?
talk about like that,
Yeah.
that, you know, we're constantly in motion and no two moments are alike and we're all snowflakes.
Right.
Sure. That is
interesting,
some cool,
but
that is some, and that's also I characterize as, you know, freshman year, you're smoking a joint for the
Right.
first time and you're like, whoa, man. And if that was an artist, a singer, a rapper, a fashion designer who speaks in abstract analogies and religious parables, cool.
right.
But when you are telling me, so again, this is almost like sports for me. It's like, I don't really hate the Yankees, the people who play for the Yankees. I hate their fans.
Mm-hmm.
Kanye fans who are telling me, like when you said you can be profound, I don't think that's profound. I think that anybody can sound profound by, like you said,
Right.
you have a couple tidbits, you speak in riddles, you have a couple ways of saying like, but, you know, did you think about it like this?
And then you get caught up and you say that it's Los Angeles, and it's like, dude, what was that?
I mean, that's really, honestly, it's hard for me. Like Kanye West, in some regard, I guess, is a billionaire. I can't understand what happened there. He was $50 million in debt, and then all of a sudden, Yeezy's worth billions, and he has a huge stake in that. So he's a billionaire. But Forbes, the article I read said that Forbes begrudgingly agreed that he's a billionaire. So there's something going on there. But regardless, he's wildly wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
And when he speaks about how Virgil went from Donda to Louis Vuitton, and another guy went from Donda to Givenchy, like, yeah, that's, you know, that's his Barstool. That's like if Dave and, you know, I went on to big things and Dan went on to big things and Dave was at the center of it. So he does do impressive things. So on some level, he has to be a smart and accomplished man. But I think what is more impressive about him is his creativity, not necessarily his intelligence. Because when he talks, I say that's a dude who's trying to sound smart.